So in my app, this is called Bolton Project 1. I have 3 activities. This is the first activity. It's basically a note-taking app. So this is the app. This is the activity where you can display notes. So if I create data, I add notes to this activity. I also have an editor activity, which is my second activity. And then as well, I have another web view activity that basically shows work about the developer. On top of that, I do have the one dialog box. If I say I want to delete all notes, I have my dialog box come up, says, "Are you sure?" You can delete all the notes. And my threads, although you can't see, anytime I add a note to my database, such as this, hi, and come back, it's ran on a thread, a background thread. And instead of using a thread object, I instead use a, if I can go to it, I use a cursor loader. And what the cursor loader does, it basically loads the cursor on a background thread. And when the load, it creates a cursor object and it uses my content provider. It specifies my content provider, and we launch the separate thread. So it's different from, so it's not doing database operations on the main UI thread. And once the load is finished, I get the load and I swap out the adapter for my list view, thus updating the most current data. And I receive the data in here and I receive the loader object from my background thread. And then I basically swap the data out with my cursor adapter and add the most recent data. So those are my threads. On top of that, I have, right, and on top of that, I do have one list. If you can see, this is a list view. So if I create a lot of sample data, just adding a whole lot of notes to my database code, you'll notice the data is now, if I go back, I'm sorry, if I go back, the data is now in a list view, which is good. And and I also have options and context menus. So these are my menu options here. If I want to create sample data, I do that. But if I want to delete all notes, I can delete it. Basically just the use of a menu option here. And yes, and like you said, I didn't use preferences, but I did use a database, and this is my database code here. Like you said, you use the DB Open Helper class to create your database. You define your database file, your tables, columns, and you have SQL commands to create that database. And I basically run my database operations anytime I execute if I want to edit a note. For example, I will, my bad. If I want to delete a note, I'll get the content resolver and use the delete method of my database pointing to my content provider, and I'll let the user know that I deleted this message. And if I finish editing, if I do an insert, then I'll call my insert method, and that's another CRUD method that will basically create a content values object and use the values put method and specify what column in my database I want to put the database, the note that I typed, the string that I put into my text. Then I get the content resolver and I call the database's insert method, specifying the content URI and then the values. And that's my app. So one last time, the app is just a simple note. I have a floating action button here. It loads a new activity. You can add plenty of notes. And another note is added to this activity.